Fearless Leader Podcast.
All right. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mr. Belton back at you with another episode of the Fearless Leader Podcast. This evening, I have Mr. Lee. He'll introduce himself. We'll have some laughs and talk about some great things that he's brought to education. So right now, I'll introduce Mr. Ronald C. Lee.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to join my little brother here on the show here. I've known him for a couple of years. My name is Ronald Lee. Just to give you a little background on me, I served about 12 years as a school business administrator in Orange Public Schools, and then I went to Newark for 7 years and served as the CFO, school business administrator there. And then Orange asked me to come back to be the superintendent, which I was there off and on between the retirement at the end, I guess about 10 years. And then I just finished a year contract with the Trenton Public Schools as their interim superintendent. So that's a little bit about me.
That's cool. Mr. Lee, let me ask you. So I know your background was business, and I know you used to always walk me through how you initially got into the business world. But how did I want to capture that a little bit, because you always used to tell me some good things about how you walked into the business world. So can you and I remember one in particular, this where you used to talk about the green suit situation and how that happened. So I want you to tell my listeners I want you to touch on that, and then I want you to walk me through just a little bit of how you actually became a BA.
Okay, so, and a lot of this will probably be a common theme that maybe we'll get an opportunity to talk about, because when I talk to young people, I always say, you never know where you're going to wind up, but you should be ready for what opportunities God might put your way. And so when I was in high school, I'm gonna go back to high school, senior in high school, I needed a course to fill my schedule. I didn't know what to take. So I asked a friend of mine, hey, what should I pick, to fill a schedule? And he suggested to me accounting. Now, I'm like many of the students that we have educated over the last several years, as far as you and I now, education over 30 years. I was a kid from Brooklyn, grew up in the projects, so I was about 14, 15. My parents were blue collar workers, and there was really no conversation about college or whatever. And so when he suggested to me accounting, I'm a Brooklyn kid. I'm like, what's accounting? So he said he had taken the course, and that it was a lot of math or whatever. He said, you're good at math, you'll do well. And obviously, as a 16, 17-year-old kid, your next question is, you think I'll get a quick A in this, because, I was looking for an easy course because I was in my senior year. And he said, I think you'll like it. So I took the course, did well in it. Then it was time for me to go, because I did make the decision that I wanted to go to college. To pick a major. Now, back then, when you picked your major, you really started out your first semester in major courses, not like they do now. You might have to wait a year or two before you really get thrown into your major. And so I bought the New York Times as a 17, 18-year-old kid. I bought the Sunday New York Times, which has all the help wanted ads. And this is where I tell kids, you never know where you're going to be. And I always talk about have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C if you have to. So my plan A coming out of school realistically was, I really liked theater. I had done a little bit of theater. I wanted to be an actor, but I had heard the horror stories about acting, just got to struggle, and, bread and water and serving tables in restaurants and doing all that. And so I bought the New York Times and went through the help wanted section. And because on Sunday, that's where they really advertise a lot of their jobs, because I didn't want to go through 4 years of school, because realistically, coming out of high school, like most kids, I'm like, oh, I got to do 4 more years of school. And so what I did was there were a lot of jobs in the accounting finance area. I mean, pages and pages of jobs. So I was like, oh, maybe this is what I'll do, because, once I finish school, I'll at least have a job coming out. So I took accounting in in college. And then when I was leaving my senior year in college, um, the college had an employment office. Firms would come to interview candidates. And so I was interested in getting my certified public accountant, because that was kind of the apex of the profession. So I went to get my CPA. So you had to work for a CPA firm. And so I started working for a CPA firm. And I was working at what is now known as KPMG. I did that for about probably 8.5 years. I was actually lucky to be the manager on the largest client in the New York office. Actually, it's probably one of the largest clients in the firm. It was an international firm, but at least in the country. And I grew up kind of on that account. So I started with a small firm, but it merged. Well, it was the 9th largest firm, but it merged. We were the KPMG, actually. We merged with what was Pete Morris back then to become KPMG. But when I was in the KPMG main urban, I got an opportunity because people, they recognized my skill set. And that was very rare back then, that an African-American would have an opportunity to at least run the biggest client, but beyond the biggest client. And so after doing that, I met some young men who had a firm in Newark. It was a minority firm. I was interested in venturing out. I've always been interested in business. And so they started recruiting me. I kind of liked what they were talking about. And so I moved to a smaller firm, became a partner. And it was through that, the Orange Board of Education was actually a client of that firm. That an opportunity came. It wasn't even my client, it was my partner's client. And Orange was in a lot of trouble back then. And he asked me to go in and fix it. And my reputation, my thing is I like to go fix stuff. I like to go where those things are. And so I went on his client and kind of, got engaged on that. And then they had hired a new superintendent who was a sister from New Orleans, who didn't really know New Jersey. So I was kind of mentoring and advising her. Her BA actually quit the second day she started. And so she started nagging me about, why don't you come be a BA? Why don't you come be my BA? And I'm like, I'm not interested
Right.
Because I had corporate clients. I'm like, I'm not interested in public, the public sector.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically, she wore me down to be truthful about it. She wore me down. And that's how I basically got into education.
Okay. So, so under the guise of the business administration, Mr. Lee, how did that sort of walk you through the role as a superintendent? And I have to attest, I have to say that I know you were excellent with money and budgeting, but on a larger scale, can you talk to how that sort of benefited you or helped you or supported the role?
I was lucky enough to I've always looked at entities and organizations on how can you improve and do things better. Even when I was in the corporate side, my clients used to, I used to come up with ideas for guys who had, they passed down their businesses from generation to generation, and I would look at what they were doing to come up with an idea. And they're like, you know what, we have never even thought about that, but always kind of thinking about, hey, what could you do better? And so when I was a business administrator, I wasn't, some might say the typical business administrator where I stayed in my lane per se and just did business. Mm-hmm. My thing was, if I'm going to help the organization, I need to know what, and I took it from a business model. Who are our clients? How do we best serve them? What are their needs? And how do we funnel money to address the needs of those students? And so when I was sitting meetings with the curriculum folks and the superintendent and the curriculum folks, I was listening. I was, doing a lot of listening, coming up with suggestions. I would always use the line, hey, look, I'm not the educator, but have we thought about doing this? Right, and after using that line so much, folks would stop me and say, you're the educator that's in the room, because I would look at things a little differently. So I was listening to the business that we were doing. Some business administrators, they kind of tune out and they just, count the money per se. And that wasn't my thing. My thing is, how do I help? How can I help in improving not only just the organization, but the lives of the kids that we were in charge of doing?
You have to walk me through, walk the listeners through to um, the STEM. So, I mean, Mr. Lee did something that I just haven't seen done, where, but I'm gonna let you explain that process. So there's two processes to actually that I want you to jump into. I want you to talk a little bit about STEM, the Academy of the Oranges, and then I want you to talk about the P-Tech program that you help establish in Trenton. So, just
Okay, so
start with
this is
STEM.
going to go back to what I was speaking of earlier. So, and so in order for me to explain this to your listeners, I have to explain who I am and what, where I wouldn't say my ideas come from, but what I look at. So again, I said to you that my parents really weren't talking a whole lot about college. It was the school. Um, Although I grew up in the projects, this really didn't hit me till about really 20 years ago. Um, that I never went to school in my own neighborhood, which was probably a blessing. So I went to school in New York City. They tried, I was part of the, trying to desegregate the schools. So I got bused to other communities. And so I've always been integrated and went to school in integrated environments. So I didn't grow up with that inferiority complex. I didn't grow up with, all of that. And so it was my school, my high school, that really led me to what do you do to get ready for college? When kids would say, "Are you taking the SAT?" Again, I'm like, "What's the SAT? What are we supposed to be doing?" And just those kind of things. And so when I realized, what the experiences they were getting versus the experience of the kids in my own community. So when I got to where I am today, or as a business administrator or specifically a superintendent, my goal has always been, and my mantra is, how do we level the playing field? How do we provide opportunities for kids in urban communities, and specifically kids of color or at risk, as we want to put them? How do we give them the same opportunities that the socioeconomic situations of their parents shouldn't limit to what they can do and be exposed to? And so I'm always looking, and I'm going to give you an example today. I just happened to go to one of our former teachers, opened up, bought the dance school in South Orange here. I live in South Orange. And, I was just there so proud because part of that, because some of the dancers were alumni. You had a young lady there who is now a Rockette. Had another young lady who's in Broadway, although she said Broadway's not in, but she's in Harry Potter on Broadway as a dancer. And just some of the experiences that those young people are now making a living out of because of experiences we were able to give them. So I opened up, or was, I would say part of the brainchild in Orange, where we opened up a dance conservatory about probably in 2010, about around in there. I had some extra money laying around. I asked the staff for grants. Hey, what are some programs you might want to create for our students? And one of them was this dance conservatory. So for the last, I guess, 10 years or so, or 8 or 9 years or so, Orange Public Schools has had a dance conservatory, which they were running on Fridays and Saturdays. And young people would come into dance. So my what has led me to, folks think, hey, I'm a great visionary. I don't say that. I just say, hey, look, what are they doing in neighboring communities where they're wealthy, and why can't, they do that? So this full circle came together for me today, because the dance school that the teacher bought, I took my daughter there when she was about 9 or 10, and she did it 1 year. So I don't like dance. I'm a basketball player. So she didn't like dance. But when I became superintendent, I was like, well, how come, folks in South Orange or Livingston, they can, if their parents have money, they can send their kids to these programs, but the kids in Orange and Newark and so forth can't do that. So again, that's a part of leveling the playing field. Where can we find money within our budget, redistribute it, and provide some opportunities for students? So getting back to your question about STEM and P-TECH, we know that STEM is a significant portion of the things that we do for today. We know that there are jobs that are they're available now, but they need to be filled. In conversations with people in the STEM industries, they say there's a shortage of not only just Americans, but specifically people of color who are going into the fields. So I had two goals with the STEM. One was the project or the content of STEM, but the other is creating a second high school opportunity for Orange students. Many of our parents, for whatever reason, and again, it's their choice, at the time didn't have as high a confidence about the Orange Public Schools. Right. And I was, from my whole tenure there, it was about building up specifically the high school and the middle school and building up the program so that parents are going to make their choices. They're going to choose charter school or private school or public schools. We have to be competitive. Again, using a business model, we need to be competitive as to what we provide, but we also need to promote a lot of the great things that are going on. If, folks don't know, what great programs and opportunities there are in public schools. And I would tell people who would send kids to their, public schools or private schools that it's not necessarily where you start off, because if you're a parent who's really involved in your child's education, in the worst school in the country, wherever that might be, the high school, there are always kids who are graduating, going on to great schools.
Correct.
And I would say that, you spend your $20,000 a year for your kid to go to high school somewhere else. But when it comes to college, they'll be sitting right next to a kid in Newark, right next to a kid in Irvington, right next to a kid in Chicago. They'll be sitting right next to them. And so, but it's about creating those opportunities. So again, with the STEM, I wanted to create another opportunity, another avenue, and another pathway, I'll just say. But we didn't have no place in the town to do it. The town has this old police station that we've been begging for 20 years to get. Right. And for whatever reason, and I don't question the reason, we couldn't get it. So the old Marylawn High School became available, but Marylawn sits in the footprint of South Orange, which is the neighboring town.
Yes. And
I did a little homework, and I kind of knew we could do it because in Newark, when we had to find some replacement school classes when one of our schools had a fire, we went outside the lines into Belleville, and so I had some lawyers look it up. We pursued it. We lost out originally because Seton Hall outbid us, but then the South Orange community, because Seton Hall was going to run night programs, and Seton Hall is literally in my backyard, so I know the noise that occurs at night. Right. And so the community objected to it. And so the sisters of Marylawn, who owned the building, came back to us to say, are you still interested? We were able to put that together. We partnered with NJIT. Actually, we did a whole lot of conversation with industry people. Mm-hmm. Hey, if we're going to teach our students today, we need to know what does industry need for them to know. And so they helped us build our program. Then we started talking to colleges. So we talked to NJIT, we talked to, I know Essex County College, and there might have been another one, I'm not sure. And because we wanted kids to get college credits while they were taking the courses. Right. And so we went to a meeting with NJIT, and we were thinking, okay, kids might get, 15, 20 credits by the time they graduate. The provost who we met with, he says to us, we kind of like what you're trying to do. And he threw on the table 40 credits. We think kids can graduate with 40 credits. We kind of looked at each other like, we'll take it,
That's a go. That's right.
And so what we did was we crosswalked the curriculum. So the kids in their junior, senior year, if it's still running the same way, get an opportunity to take actually NJIT courses. And we actually have, and I'm assuming they're still doing it, we were bringing in professionals who would assist with the teacher to bring real world into the classroom. Because I think that's important. The kids need to connect. With P-Tech, it's the same thing. We went to P-Tech in Brooklyn. You were there when we met. Yes. Rashid there. We were blown away with their program. Yes. Yes. We helped build that. We actually kind of took that model and kind of crafted it for Orange. And I just think it's a great opportunity for our students. I really think it's important that, and I've said this to my board members, and I've said this in public before, test scores are nice. That just measures how well we're doing. But it does, I always feel that our job in K-12 is, specifically in urban and communities of color, is to expose our students to career paths that they wouldn't have normally been exposed to. And if they can make a career out of it, so for example, like today, we have young ladies who are dancers, they're Rockettes and they're on Broadway. Right. They may not have been able to do that had we not exposed them to that.
Agreed.
And so how do we level the playing field? Because a kid who lives in a wealthy community, their parents are taking them to museums, they're taking them to, London and Paris, they're giving them their tutors, they're doing these other things to kind of supplement their education. But in our communities, we really don't have that built in. So I always felt that it was the school system where we fill in those gaps and those holes and provide those kind of opportunities for our students. So if a kid like me, if I didn't get introduced to accounting in high school, I'd be driving, and there's nothing wrong with it. So don't get me wrong, because that's what my father did. That's why I'm using this. I'd be driving a bus or a train somewhere. And that's what my brother did. My brother, he didn't go to college. That's what he did. But because I was exposed to it in high school. And so how do we expose these kids to architecture and engineering? We used to do, or we still, I don't know what you're doing now with the virtual board meetings, but every month we were recognizing kids. When we first did it, kids were like, I want to be a rapper, I want to be basketball, I want to go to football. We fast forward 7-8 years later, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a veteran, I want to be, because we were exposing them to those opportunities. So I'm
gonna jump in real fast on the exposure part though, Mr. Lee, because I like the idea that even understanding what we did with the students or what you did with the district, the idea of exposing the administrators who were underneath you, because I just remember, like you said, running. I'm not even sure. I think you rented a bus for us to go to P-Tech.
Oh yeah.
If that was that trip, and I remember the countless other university trips or the MOUs you try to establish with different universities for different things. So I always knew it was just about, making that connection. So it wasn't just the exposure at the level, for the students, but it was also making sure that the administrators were exposed and had some insight to what was going on outside of the district, which sort of prompted me to always be like, Mr. Lee, can I go here? Can I go there? Once once that sort of started. So I appreciated that. And before we get too deep into it, I do want to recognize Mr. Lee for his problem solving skills. So I want to run. You already know my thing with you with this one. So I want to let everybody know. So we were all at a round table and we were about 250, maybe 250 to 300 calculators short for testing that was going to happen in about a week. So everyone's sitting around the table and folks are starting to point fingers. It's starting to get ugly, this, that, and the other. So Mr. Lee walks in. Mr. Lee hears the gist of the argument and sort of like, I guess, just kind of took it in and left. And when he left, I was like, oh, we going back to the same old thing. And so we went right back to everybody pointing fingers and this, that, and the other. Mr. Lee returns probably about 10, 15 minutes later. Mr. Lee comes in. he says, who's driving to, well, I forgot the town though. I forgot, but I'm just going throughout the town. It's like, who's driving to Teaneck? Cause I got the calculators at a warehouse in Teaneck, and me and another administrator, we raised our hands, and I just wanted to, that's the kind of brother that Mr. Lee is, because it was just about the problem solving. It wasn't about, harping on the problem. So I definitely appreciated how you could maneuver through that. And so that leads me to my next question though, about, you would always talk to us about, or to me specifically about, building a team. So talk to me about, because I remember asking you at times things that you've done, and you would always say, you always put it back to the team. Mm-hmm. So can you want to expound on the importance of team and what how you felt the importance of team was?
Yeah, again, my experience. So when I was a younger man, I always thought in order to get things done right, I had to do it myself. And it was literally probably killing me. I was, not getting home, leaving home at 7 a.m, not getting home till 11 at night, and so forth and so on, and actually missed a lot of the early part of my kids growing up. One day I got, that's why I said it might have been killing me. One day I got ill. I had to go to the hospital, had some heart palpitations. But sitting there, I was like, you know what? No matter how we think that one person stops a show, the show will still go on if you're not there. And so I had to reprioritize what was not only what was important to me, but number two, how do I get done and start slowly building good people around me who I can trust and give them and hand off some of the things, and who could carry out a vision or had a vision of their own that they could bring to the table. And so I started building up this team I would say team concept, but for me, it was a concept. And so it was finding good people, supporting them, and nurturing wherever they need some support. But more importantly, building a team for me is like a pieces of a puzzle. I mean, you might have a great piece. You might have someone who's great, but you have the puzzle, which is the whole picture of either district or the organization. And that person may not be the right piece, although they have a skill set, but they may not be. So one of the first things, and you can take this for on your personal level or professional level. First, we have to always analyze what are our weaknesses, what are our strengths, and what are our weaknesses. Who has the strength, who has the weakness? And really, that analysis happens really with the top for me. So, I had to know what were my strengths and what were my weaknesses, and who do I get to fill the weakness portion. But you do that team member to team member, and you look at the team as a whole, and you carefully build your team to, and like I said, when I say pieces of puzzle, they have to be able to work together. The personalities have to click. Although I'm not saying there's not going to be arguments and disagreements. And you probably know my thing is, I'm not one of those. I don't want yes people around me. I want people who are going to tell me the truth. If I come up with a concept in a meeting, I want someone to say, I don't think that's going to work. Okay, tell me why. What's your thoughts? Give me your thoughts. I don't want folks who are going to yes, and then when they get outside and they go, well, you know what, because if they're not on board, so I want them to give me their point of view, and I wouldn't say convince me of their point of view, but their point of view, and I may counter if I think, or I may say, you know what, I never thought about that. That's a good point. Maybe we need to go somewhere else. One thing about team is, and I hope you could be able to attest to this. I always say when things go well, that's the team's. That's what the team did. If things go bad, that's my responsibility. Mm-hmm. I don't throw people under the bus. I'm not one to look at. So we'll go back to your problem solving thing that you said. Problems come up. Problems happen. Yes. Things happen. But the question is, while we're spending time pointing fingers and the problem's still there, it still needs to be solved. The question is, what is the solution? And how do we come up with a solution? Even with when my management style and what I like to spend some time on identifying a problem. I like to spend more time, probably most of the time, on developing the solution. And then the second biggest piece, or they might be equal. I mean, I don't really measure how much of it is in the implementation. But oftentimes you hear people spending a lot of times on the problem. Oh, we got this, we got this.
Correct.
Blah, 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 blah. You spend it 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and the problem is still there.
Still there.
So the question is, what's the solution, or what's the possible solution? Let's come up with a solution. Let's talk about the solution. So I always say, okay, give me, and you'll hear me say, okay, what's the problem? Boom. Okay. That's it. All right. Now, what are some of the ways that we can solve the issue?
Right.
And then spend time on that, and then spend time, obviously, on implementing the problem. So, teamwork, people have to be able to look. We spend as much time at work than we do with our families.
Correct.
And so we need to be able to really not only just get along, but like-minded to an extent, because like I said, we don't want just yes people.
Right.
But at least the same goals and the same folk. And our mission and goals should be the same. It's educating kids and providing them with opportunities so that when they leave us, we're not, and I'm going to say I stole this from you, and I was using this in Trenton too. We're not graduating them to the streets.
Right. Correct.
We're graduating them to a job or to the military or to some college program or trade program. That's where we're graduating them to, and so we just need to be, provide those guidance to do that. And so, like I said, building a team, I'll talk about the STEM school. I was a visionary behind it, but implementing it, I had a whole team of people who were able to get it done.
Right. Let me ask you, what was your and then we'll move to the students now. What was your thing, Mr. Lee, with always being able to give a student like a second chance? Like, did that come from something that you had to deal with when you were coming up? I mean, you and I, we came across I've seen some rough ones come across through the office, across paperwork, across the desk. But you were like, listen, we're going to give this person another opportunity. What did something happen with you personally, or was it like what was the leading factor behind that?
So my early part of my school, I would say to 7th grade. 7th grade I could definitely remember through 7th grade. I was a knucklehead. I talked back. If I had to go to the bathroom, I figured I'd follow the rules. I raised my hand, go to the bathroom. Teacher's like, you can't go now. And I'd be like, what do you mean? I got to go now.
Right,
I'm one of those. I walk out of. So that was me. And so I saw a lot of that in the kids. And you've heard me have these conversations with kids, and actually have these conversations with adults. Have you had your aha moment? Mm-hmm. When the light bulb goes off,
right,
and all the problems that you've been having is not mom, it's not dad, it's not the teachers, it's not your brothers and sisters, it's not your friends, it's you.
Right.
And I had to come to that realization in the 7th grade and then when people start questioning not your intelligence, but questioning whether you have psychological issues. Mm-hmm. And you're going like, hey, nothing, wrong with me just because, because I didn't want to per se follow the rules. I had to learn that the problem was with me. I did have a little anger management problem back then, and I knew what my triggers were. I had to understand it. So you hear me conversate with kids because a lot of it is anger. They're acting out because of anger, or someone's not understanding them or respecting them, or they just want to do some things that you're just not allowing them to do. They just don't want to follow the rules of the day.
Right.
And so I don't think you should be one and done. I don't think you should be two or done. I always have the kids talk. I would find out a little bit about their lives. And sometimes they didn't have anyone who could speak to them from an adult's perspective.
Right.
And sometimes we filled, you and I, or whatever, folks filled those roles. Mm-hmm. And, now, one of the most difficult things is, I came in, wide-eyed and everything that I could save everybody. But one of the most difficult things I had to come to a realization that I can't save everybody, but I tried to save everybody.
Yeah.
And
let me ask you, did you open up in Trenton how you did in Orange? Because I mean, you would do you remember how you opened up when we walked when you just went through the community?
No, I didn't get enough. When I started in Trenton, school was already open. School, the school year had already opened. I did do some community things such as, town hall meetings.
Okay.
At first I got together because again, doing an assessment, I realized that internally, folks weren't necessarily working together. So I brought them together. Hey, what do we do? Hey, it's on us. This is our time to provide the students that we have right now with their educational experiences, and what are we doing? Because that's on our watch. And so we got together, started talking some stuff. Then I was transitioning to a strategic plan, development of strategic plans. So I brought the community in, having conversations, hearing what the communities, because that's where you really get to hear what the community feels about, the district. And I always say school systems sometimes are are just a byproduct or of what's going on in the community. Mm-hmm. Although we can't fix all the problems, we are always charged with fixing all of the problems.
That's right.
And that's not a task we run away from, because, like I said, I still believe that if we, speak to kids, give them opportunities, and it has to be consistent, that, we can catch a lot of the students. I mean, you and I, you specifically, but you and I know that some of the hardened gangsters that we had, when we started talking, and we're just, you and I just talking to them because, hey, I really care about you, and talking and not knowing that simple conversations really meant that much to them.
Right.
Just by you saying, hey, you want to play on the basketball team? Let me see if I can get you on the basketball team, and because, for whatever reason, they didn't have or don't have someone in their lives that really kind of meant to them. Or I'm hoping they have someone who loves and cares for them. But by you taking an interest in just in a conversation, I always say, I didn't realize that how much of a small conversation in small talk meant to a lot. It means a lot to our kids.
Agree.
Even a simple thing about, I would tell teachers and principals, hey, just say good morning to all the kids.
Right.
How you feeling? How you doing? And, once they get comfortable with you, they start opening up and so forth and so on. And
I'm gonna jump in with a story, but I can't divulge the student's name, but you'll know exactly. I remember Mr. Lee going to bat for this student several times. And I think like once or twice I might have kind of threw my hands up with him, but Mr. Lee worked with this young man. And I remember that the young man, there was something going on in the building, and the young man I called the young man on the phone to kind of de-escalate the situation. He comes to the school, smooths it out, both ends. Like I'd had like 6 parents in there. He, smoothed the situation out and asked me, was everything good? I told him, yeah. I walk him to the front door. I go to walk back into the building. This young man continues to walk out. He turns back around, calls my name in the hallway and says, tell Mr. Lee he owes me one. So I understand definitely, Mr. Lee, the power of those relationships with those students. Definitely.
You're not thinking, you're not conversating with them at the time to establish those relationships. You just really have an interest. Hey, what do you want to do? Because you want to help them, I would say get on the right path. And, surprisingly, it really meant a lot to some of these young people. And even I was just speaking to someone today about, we had some young ladies who were kind of rough.
Oh yeah, we did.
And, I would meet with them like, hey, look, don't make me, ruin your senior year. And I talk to them like they my own kids.
Yes.
And, what are you doing here? I see him in the streets, or I see him like, what are you doing here? You ain't supposed to be here. Get
Right,
you,
right,
in
right.
the school or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So it's not about being afraid of, just it's that I understand it because, like I said, I was there.
Right.
And, I just really think that where possible, that we should give young people as many opportunities. Or when will they have their aha moment? Hey, look, we got people who are 40, 50, 60, still ain't had their aha moment.
I agree.
When they realize that, hey, wait a minute, I'm the one that's really causing all the problems for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So you try to at least impart, hopefully, some wisdom with some of these young folks that they really look within. Hey,
Right.
what's really going on with you? And what's the real issue? It ain't
Right.
mom, it ain't dad. I mean, look,
Right.
mom and dad, okay, they're doing the best they can. But what could you be doing differently? What choices?
Mm-hmm.
Life is about choices.
Right. Let
And
me
what
ask you.
choices can you make?
I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, but let me ask you. What I remember, years back, some time back, and you came in, and I think we opened the year when you were like, I want to know, like, what was the spark, or what kind of put you in a position to open up the year with us. I think it was one year when you said we really put a focus on college scholarships.
Mhm.
We just came in, and I think it was like, listen, you needed to know where the kid was going, if the kid had already left, where the kid was, how much money did the scholarships, it was just like this massive push. Like, was there something that you had seen, or the place that you like, what was and then after that, it's just that's how we've moved ever since.
Right.
So was there like something that kind of put you in the space to be like, like that push? It was just like, where's this kid going? How much money are they going to be receiving? Where did that stem from?
So again, we're going back to the culture of the school. If the culture of the school, so I wanted us to create a culture where, and it's like that in many higher performing or high income districts. The kids are competitive where they're going. The kids are competitive for what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. But we have to teach the kids what the process is. You have to know the rules of the game. Look, I have 4 kids of my own. I was just joking with my wife the other day. We probably didn't get it right until the 4th kid. And we both went to college, and we sent 3 others to college. We still didn't get it right. So I was bringing some of those personal things into schools. Like, hey, look, we got to really, get these kids to understand, hey, take the SATs, hopefully twice by your junior year, get your personal statement ready. Don't procrastinate, get your stuff in. Understanding. When I went to high school, I didn't know anything about the importance of GPA. So I'm gonna tell my Duke story. When I was graduating, I was an average student. Graduating from high school, where are you going? Where are you applying? Kids are asking, where are you applying? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I see the Blue Devils on TV, da 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 da. So I'm like, I'm applying to Duke. I didn't know what kind of school Duke was. I didn't know that schools were ranked. Again, I'm a project kid. Applied to Duke. Where you going? I'm going to Duke. I just think you just apply, you got in. When I got the packet, the little thin packet back, I opened it up, thank you for your application, but I'm sorry, we're not, you're not accepted. So I'm like, I didn't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Applied to some other schools, eventually got in, but kids don't know that the process from going to college really starts before 9th grade, but at least the record starts at 9th grade. They don't, They don't understand, but we have to tell them that. So we have to tell them that you're building your resume, your dossier starting in 9th grade. So all those classes count. You can't just, I always tell kids, and this has been my philosophy. I told my own kids, I said, there are 6 years in your life you really need to invest in yourself. That's the first 3 years in high school, because that can determine, and if you got great GPA and stuff like that, that can determine what schools are available to you.
Mm-hmm.
And your first 3 years in college, because when you're, at least for me, when I was looking for a job, they were looking, because I was in my senior year when I was looking for a job, they only had my first 3 years grades. So the same thing for high school. They really only have your first 3 year grades when you're applying to college.
College, right.
And I said, isn't it worth if you live to the average age of a person of 80 to 85, isn't it worth that for 6 years of investing in yourself, that you may not be struggling for 60 years from 20 to 80? You may not be struggling because you planted good seed in great soil and you watered it and put it in the sun, and it grew and blossomed and allowed you to hopefully follow the pathway that you wanted to do, versus you throw that away and then you're always trying to restart and to get that together. And so the earlier we can have those conversations with kids. So GPA, community service, how involved are you in your school? They want to see leaders. They want to see if you're volunteering. So all of those things, helping kids to build that up. So I'm gonna go back to the green suit since you like to talk about it. I've been talking about this. This story is proud. No, it was in my high school. It was I was a senior in high school. So I tell the story about knowing the rules of the game, and I always use myself when I talk to the kids. So I'm a senior in high school. I'm a senior in college. I'm sorry, senior in college. And back in the days, I was in my club days too. I was going. I was partying Friday night, Saturday night, but I was going to the clubs in New York City. So I had this Calvin Klein tweed green suit that, with my little thin red tie. If you could imagine sort of like Eddie Murphy in, what was the movie with him and Nick Nolte, where he had the thin tie and.
Was that 48 Hours? 48
no,
hours.
It was 48 hours.
48 hours, yeah.
So I had my suit.
Right,
and everything.
right.
And so I had an interview. I was interviewing, again, I'm always assessing. So I had worked in a supermarket for my first 3 years in college. And I said, hey, look, if I'm going to be an accountant, I need an accountant's job. I need something to at least show that I had some experience. So during the summer between my junior and senior year, I went applying for some internship. One was with Department of Sanitation in New York City. And the other was with a very prominent accounting firm. I had the interview on the same day. So that day I get up, I put on my tweed green Calvin Klein suit. I was GQ back then. Calvin Klein green shirt with my maroon. They had those knit ties, and had maroon wingtip shoes. Couldn't tell me anything. I was the dude. So my first interview was with this prominent accounting firm. And so, I get on the elevator, get off into this lobby, prominent wood panel lobby. I say, hey, I have an interview with someone. They says, okay, down the hall. And the gentleman is waiting for you. So I get into the interview, I'm interviewing, I'm doing my thing. I can see the guy looking at me, like looking over the desk, just looking at me. But I can see he's looking at what I'm wearing.
Right.
Me being cocky and everything else, like, yeah, see, he's saying he ain't never seen nobody dressed like this.
Right.
So I push my chair back, fold my legs, like, look at all of this.
Right.
You want me here because look at all of this. And I finished the interview, thought I killed it. And that's the conversation I have with kids, because you think you killed an interview. But sometimes we think that, they didn't like me because I was Black, or they didn't like me. Not to say that doesn't happen. But
Right.
I go down a couple of blocks to the Department of Sanitation. They're casually dressed and everything else. And the guy commented, the guy was interviewed, he's the manager of the department. Oh, you're very well dressed. And he even said, you're dressed better than my employees that I have here. But because I had on a suit, they didn't have on something. I had on a suit.
Right.
So lo and behold, I did get the sanitation offer, but I never got the offer from the prominent accounting firm. During my senior year, we started taking trips to the accounting firms, to learn, what they do, and really to expose ourselves, and network ourselves. While there, I realized everybody I saw had on a blue pinstripe suit, white shirt, tie like Trump and Biden wears, those kind of ties.
Something traditional, right.
And I realized that this guy wasn't looking at me because he thought I was, fly.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted me to work there. This guy was saying, this clown can't really think he's going to come working here dressed like that. But that's because I didn't know the rules to the game. And so I always say to kids, do your homework, find out about the company, or find out about what you're seeking, because I didn't do that. Now, when I was graduating, then started my interviews, what did I have on? I had on my blue suit, my pinstripe suit, my white shirt, and so forth and so on.
Right.
So I had to fall in. So I always say, what are the rules of the game? So the same thing about college. You need to know what the rules of the game. You can't just wake up. I'm reminded of a student that was in your office one day, a young lady. So I wanted to go. Matter of fact, we were talking to her because they weren't going to graduate. And they needed at least almost another year of credit to graduate.
Okay.
So, but the young lady is sitting at me and talking about, I want to go to college. I want to go to college. I said, and I remember saying to her, you kind of woke up a little late for that. Right. I said, not to say you can't go to college, but you're not going to go in June.
Right.
Because you're not even going to graduate.
Right.
I said, because you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and follow the rules to get you on that path. That's so that you can graduate with your class and go to college. So, hopefully, and I didn't keep up with her, but hopefully she had her, again, her aha moment. But again, it's about exposing our kids to understanding, whether we like it or not, there are rules and there are expectations.
Right.
Those expectations.
Let me ask you, Mr. Lee, what are, so Superintendent of Trenton, Superintendent of Orange, give me some of the negative and positives of what that is, being superintendent of serious urban districts. Walk me through the negative and positives of that.
I don't think, what my answers may not be this specific to urban.
Okay.
It's just specific to running organizations.
Got you.
Is trying to get everybody to work together. You've often heard me say, the problems with schools aren't the kids.
You used to always say that. You always said that. Yep. The
problem with most, if there's a kid that's messed up, I guarantee there's an adult that has a hand in it. Mm-hmm. Whether the kid decides to join a gang, well, they felt more comfortable with their friends than they do at home with their family or whatever. Or they're trying to measure up to some adult or what they're doing. And so, my thing has always been, if I can get the adults out the way, because kids are great. I mean, they really are. So getting people to work together, not about you. Take the ego. It ain't about you. It's about, what are we doing for kids? You can't say it's about you, and then when the district is measured by something and doesn't do well, and then you want to blame the superintendent, or the leaders of the district, but the superintendent and the leaders of the district aren't the ones teaching the kids and doing everything. So you need to take some responsibility for that as well. But we don't, and I'm not saying we point fingers, but we collectively come together and say, how do we make this a better system? But I've always, I always think that no matter what you are a leader in, whether it's an entire organization or a school or a classroom, the management of it and how you manage it will determine how well it goes. So we know there are some, just as an example, there's some teachers that are excellent in classroom management because they connect to the kids. You can't connect to the kid if I had a teacher like this, that's why I use this as an example. You're not engaging the kids. Then when trouble starts in the classroom, you expect them to listen to you. They'll be like, you don't even pay us any mind. You don't even care about it. But if it's someone, and time after time again, you think that the teachers that are the toughest, I mean, they really give it to their students, are the ones that the kids love.
Right.
Those are the ones that they like.
Right.
I mean, they might, she gives a lot of work and she da-da-da. Yeah. But when you have a vote, who you like the best, they always come out on top, or the ones that really invest a lot of time to them. But getting to your question, I mean, it's most people want someone to make the decisions for them. They're afraid to make decisions. And so you're a decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're like, sometimes sometimes you feel like you might be King Solomon. Like, hey, I'm about to split the baby, whatever kind of thing. Because people don't want to be, and this is a human thing. This is not an education. People don't want to be held responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you make a decision and it's the wrong decision, then they want to be held accountable. I've always been in a position that I will make the best decision based on the facts that are presented to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you give me all the facts, I can make a decision. I'm not saying it's always going to be the right decision, but there are very few decisions I would say in my career or life that I really regret it based on the information I had. Now, if I was not given, or if a person is not given all of the information and they make a decision and later comes, they're like, well, I didn't, hey, I didn't know that. I mean, something recently came up in the district I just left. And someone comes like, that never hit the table. Your person like, yeah, that never hit the table. So how can we make a decision if that doesn't hit the table?
Right.
So
right.
if based on the facts that you have and doing what's best for whatever it is that you're in charge of doing. So let's say for kids in schools or staff members, make the decision. And because most of us want someone to tell us what to do. And this is not a negative, so I hope no one gets offended by it. But the majority of people are sheep. They want to be herded. They don't want anybody really telling them, they really want to make the decision. Okay, you tell me, you get a call, but do you really have to call me for that? Make the decision, but they want to be able to say, oh, the superintendent Lee said
right.
this. Or if it's something that's going to be controversial with, between staff members or a teachers association or whatever, they want to be able to say, oh, superintendent made this call.
Right.
But that's because it's a difficult situation, or they anticipate it may become difficult. But if you're always making a decision, this is my mantra. If I'm making a decision that I think is right, although it may be controversial, right is right, wrong is wrong. I'm not making decisions for political reasons. I'm not making decisions. We need to make decisions that is best for kids, best for staff, best for the organization, and just leave it at that. And is it going to be, difficult at times? Oh yeah, decisions are difficult. I mean, just even same thing with parents. Sometimes as parents, we got to make a decision, but we don't defer. Well, at least I hope folks aren't deferring decisions in their family about parents. They might defer to, hey, go ask your mom.
Right.
If you didn't know it's something, go ask your mom.
Right.
But it's a decision making, and a lot of people really don't, or they have a fear of being in that leadership role to make a decision. They want someone else to make a decision for them.
I always appreciated, Mr. Lee, that you always sort of brought that same philosophy back to anything that I asked you. It was whether if I hired someone, listen, you own that. Like, Mr. Lee, what you think? You think I made listen, you make the decision. Whatever it was, it came back to exactly that point, that you put folks in leadership positions because they needed to make those, make those leadership, those hard calls. And you would make sure that, listen, that's your bill. You make that call. You got to live with it, but you make that call, right? So I always appreciated that. I appreciated, this is my little wrap up, Mr. Lee, but I wanted to say that I heard you speak a lot tonight, and it just kind of took me back through a lot of the life lessons that I learned from you. And so even with the respect that you always have for the students, I remember standing on stage one time and having a teacher get recognized for their AP scores, and I think you put the check was in my hand, and I think you gently took it out my hand and put it back in the teacher's hands because you were like, listen, this was about putting it in the hands of the person who did that work. And I always remembered that. I always appreciated that. I thought that was stellar because and when you talk about team, that was a team concept, folks on the stage being recognized for what they did, not an administrator. Here, you take this, and then, because something good happened in your space, I'm going to give this to that person who put that work in and put that work in with the students. So I definitely appreciate and applauded all of that, all of the life lessons that I was able to learn from you. And so I definitely appreciate you having, you hanging with me tonight.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I'm gonna I'll make sure that you get the clean edited version of this, so that and again, wherever your travels bring you, Mr. Lee, definitely make sure that we'll keep in touch. And I learned a lot from you, so I appreciate you for being on the Fearless Leader podcast tonight. And we'll talk.